Hey guys, thank you for entering the chamber once again. We're in the heat of nationals now, which means it's time to talk about Jiro. If you want to increase your odds of beating her at nationals, then this is the video for you. You have come to the right place. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to cover her attack lineups, what her defense looks like, the best way that you can beat this character the whole line on both air and good. So you're going to sit through the whole video to find out everything. Let's get this started by looking at Air Jiro's attack lineup. Air Jiro plays a very basic game plan of trying to make very long attack strings, playing lots of low difficulty moves, and then finishing those chains out with a home run comment. As Comet is a weapon and charge, it gets a huge chunk of both damage and speed from Jiro's character, as she can use both responses on it. This pushes Comet often into like the 8 high for 9, 9 high for 10 territory, depending on the size of Jiro's card pool. She can then finish this up by turning momentum that she has left over into a large amount of damage thanks to Home Run Comet's ability to give itself a huge powerful number, creating a giant bomb that she plays at the end of a string that you usually can't block. The rest of Air Jiro's attack lineup is dedicated to making these like long strings as practical and realistic as possible. Cards like Double Jab Pummel and Specialized Sound Waves allow for her to constantly pass her checks, even if she's playing, her third, her fourth, her fifth card in a row, without committing a lot of resources. That way, when she plays the home run comment on like an 8 or a 9, or sometimes even a 10 in theory, she's able to actually pass that check without losing like her whole character and whole stage. That's kind of what the deck's whole gimmick is built around. In the past, Air Jiro would supplement these attacks with cards like Electric Jolt and Zero Gravity Lift as a way to get in guaranteed damage, which then would turn on instant explosive release, allowing you to basically just farm momentum. Recently, we've seen them kind of move away from that, and they tend to play things like Pillar Swing and Amplified Sound Blast now, instead of trying to just, farm momentum for a turn and then go in. We're now really seeing like all-in variants of Jiro, just trading at this ability to kind of like poke and get in for damage for overwhelming offense when they do assemble a kill string. Now, regardless of what their attack package looks like, this is kind of Jiro's overall game plan. She's really a glorified combo deck, which is something we don't see a whole lot of in universes. She just wants to assemble a long string of very damaging moves, thanks to her character, that are otherwise very easy to play, and she plays out this huge long chain of attacks, and you die from it. And there's not much you can really do about it once she actually assembles that chain. Now, normally I would talk about Air Jiro's defense at this point, and then move on to Good Jiro before we talk about how you handle this character kind of holistically. But it'll make sense later, but we're actually just going to go right on to Good Jiro's offense, because, spoilers, Jiro doesn't play a lot of defense. Where Air Jiro is very focused on momentum-based strategies, Good Jiro trades out that reliance on momentum for basically higher attack quality, and sometimes an even more all-in combo package. Cannon Blast and Create Capture Net are both weapons and charges, and they make the backbone of like a very scary attack package. Cannon Blast has some pretty scary stats baseline, and Capture Net on the other hand does not. But when she gets speed and damage on both of these moves equal to the number of cards in her card pool, these moves can get to some really goofy stat values for how small they are baseline, particularly Cannon Blast. Now, most Good Jiro decks tend to kind of diverge here, and they go in one of two directions. The first is focusing on Staff Strike and the Future Is Now as a way to create a truly 100% all-in combo, where you play the Future Is Now, you play some weapon foundation, it doesn't matter what it is, you play any other foundation after that, and then you play Staff Strike on a 6. Once you pass that check, your next two weapons ignore progressive difficulty, and you have 4 cards in your card pool. So if you play a Create Capture Net on a 4, because it ignores progressive, that'll be 5 cards in your card pool. That Capture Net is a 7 low 9. Then you can play Cannon Blast on a 5 after that, and your Cannon Blast starts as a 9 high for 10. And once they put the extra 3 speed and 6 damage on it, it ends up as a 12 high for 16. Which is just like a truly comical, goofy value. Like a 12 high for 16, like you're gonna die. This version of Jiro is very similar to Air Jiro. While its mechanics are a little different as it's using a different card pool, its end goal of simply just jamming one giant string of attacks and putting goofy numbers of stats on all of them and killing their opponent in one go is very similar to how Air Jiro plays. Now, There are other versions of good Jiro that kind of shy away from this all-in style and instead focus more on a simple, like, good card approach. These versions of Jiro don't have to commit to one long string and can instead try to hit their opponent over a couple of turns, which is sometimes preferable. And they use cards like Back Alley Haymaker, Airstream Driver, sometimes even Save a Million Strike as a way to simply, again, get a little bit of momentum if they need it, but keep applying that pressure playing very high stat moves. As all these moves are charges, they're going to get some free damage on top. In theory, you could also then supplement this with specialized sound waves, but again, that really depends on, the Jiro player in question. Bottom line, while there's a variety of ways that Air and good Jiro can go about trying to kill you, they actually all kind of play the same way. They're pretty uninteractive. They don't really care about what you're doing very much. They just sit down, try to do their thing, and hope that it blows you up. And if they die first or don't get there, they die first or they don't get there. Now, as I talked about, it can take a little time to assemble these long combo strings. It's not practical to always play all these cards on your second turn, especially if you only build 3 foundations because you're playing around a 2-check sometimes. Usually Jiros, if they draw everything they get, they can go in on turn 2, but typically they're looking at turn 3. So the question then becomes, how does Jiro defend herself if she has to wait at least a turn before she can really fully go in consistently? And the short answer is she doesn't. She just doesn't. Like, most Jiro decks will have a little bit of speed hate, but from there she's playing a very honest defensive game plan. You don't have any kind of cool tricks or way to discard attacks. The best thing you're doing is blocking with the specialized sound waves, so that way you can draw a card off the top of your deck. That's another attack to help, fulfill your attack string on the next turn. Baseline blocking is kind of a tough proposition for Jiro because she tends to be very combo focused. Not only literally in terms of the combo keyword, but also just in terms of holistically of what the deck is trying to do. So if you block with your combo pieces, you then have to cross your fingers that you're going to draw another set off the top of your deck, and that's not very realistic. So, especially if Jiro has most of her pieces, she's very incentivized to just kind of catch things with her face. Again, you can block with a spare foundation maybe, or again, you can use sound waves to set up a block, but anything past that, it's just not usually worth it for Jiro to try to block. This means that for a lot of people, the best way to beat Jiro, honestly, is just to go in and kill her first. She's a 27 health character with very little defense. Now, obviously, this depends on what deck you are playing, as some decks just aren't capable of doing, let's call it 35, 30 damage, because Jiro can block one move, and if she has to do not die, she'll block a second. So you have to do somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 35 to get through her 27 health. If you can't do that in 1 to 2 turns, you're going to have to really think hard about this matchup. But for a lot of people, just putting a bunch of damage on her first, especially if you win the die roll, you're gonna win a lot of your matches against her that way. Sometimes she'll have the full combo chains on the second turn and you'll die. In those situations, holding a couple of blocks and building probably wouldn't save you, and it's worth it to try to make them have to have it on their second turn. Now, where this gets dicey is if your deck can't do a lot of damage early. If you're playing control deck, you need some time to set up, or if your deck just isn't optimized to handle that much damage output for one reason or another, you're going to have to get a little creative, either in terms of denying Jiro her momentum to make sound waves less appealing, or you're going to have to find some kind of way to break up her combo strings, make it so she has to play something other than another weapon when she wants to, some way to turn off her combo enhances, etc. Exactly what that will look like for you is going to really depend on what deck you're playing, but the important takeaway that you should have is that you need to stop her from combo killing you in one go. You need to be looking for cards that do that in some way, both in your main board and sideboard. If you don't have those cards, again, depends on what symbol you're playing, but you should look into it. Ultimately, which of these two options you should go with are going to depend on board state of what cards she built, what cards you built, the cards you have in your hand, etc. But most of the time, your default game plan should just be killing her first. It's very unlikely that sitting back and trying to clap Jiro back after she goes in is going to be a winning game plan for you. A lot of the time, she's just going to kill you. Now, before we go, I'm going to give you guys a little bonus tip, and we're going to talk about her ability to scout, which I mean is looking at the top 2 cards of your deck and her deck and reorganizing them. Generally speaking, there are 3 possibilities. You can have 2 foundations on top of your deck, you can have 2 attacks on top of your deck, or you can have 1 and 1. Realistically, you're going to have more options than these, especially if you're playing assets or actions, or sometimes you're playing with foundations that only check a 4, attacks that check a 2, etc. But For the purposes of this conversation, assume that you either have 2 5s on top, 2 3s on top, or 1 5 and 1 3 on top. Now that we have our 3 possibilities, let's go through them. In the cases of having 2 foundations or 2 attacks, Jiro's rearrange doesn't really do anything or matter. We're going to be checking those cards either way, and there's not a whole lot for us to play around outside of just normally playing around checking 3s or hitting running 5s. There's not much to work with there. But we do get a little bit of information if we think about her scout as always hitting an attack and a foundation, or a 5 check and a 3 check to be more precise. If you assume that your opponent has seen a 5 and a 3, and you think about all of the options that you have on your stage to draw cards, interact with cards, etc., you can actually stop and think and plan around what it looks like if you have a 5 and a 3 on top, and think about what it looks like to Jiro when she sees that and how she would want to reorganize those cards. For example, if you have a passing the torch on your stage, it's very likely that your opponent is going to put a 5 on top and then leave the 3 underneath, because they're expecting you to use the passing the torch to draw the card on top of your deck to clear the reorganize. But because that's a heads up thing, you should play another attack and then trigger your draw. More often than not, you're going to find that the Jiro who put the 5 and 3 on top, that'll leave you checking a 5 and then drawing another attack. In execution, sometimes, you're going to have 2 attacks on top or 2 foundations on top and the line doesn't matter. Sometimes the Jiro either won't respect the passing the torch, or they'll be a step ahead of you in that situation and realize that that's what you were probably going to do. So they're going to do the thing where they don't respect you by respecting that you're aware of their options and leave that 3 right on top for you because they think you're going to wait to use the draw. I know that's kind of like a meta my game, like I know what I know deal, but that's kind of the situation that Jiro as a character puts you into. You're just going to have to deal with these sort of mind games. And at least some of the time, if you think about her scout ability under the lens of one-on-one, at least occasionally, you're going to outplay the opposing Jiro in terms of like how she organizes your cards. You'll at least occasionally make reads that are correct, and instead of making the scout a good thing for her, you can actually turn it around and make it a good thing for you. And when it comes to an ability like this and a game as random as Universes, that's kind of the best you can hope for, is occasionally outplaying your opponent. That's going to wrap up my video on Jiro. If you found this information useful, please consider giving me a like, subscribing, leaving a comment below what you think. I would really appreciate that. It helps me out a lot. With Nationals being only a week or so away, a bit less than that at time of recording, I'm going to move away from covering National-related stuff from here. I'm happy with the decks that I've covered, and instead I'm going to focus more on general Jet-Burn-related things, so including a tier list of all of the characters in the game and how I think they're going to shape up in the next set's meta. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that and other coverage of upcoming changes and videos for Universes. Once again, thank you for entering the chamber, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.